So thank you so much for joining us for today's Tech Tuesday Learning event. We're very excited about today's event and very happy about the turnout as well. This is Sandy Heyerbacher. I'm the director and co-founder of NCDD, the National Coalition for Dialogue and Deliberation. So today we have two fantastic people joining us on this call as presenters, Della Rucker and Susan Stuart Clark. Della is managing editor of EngagingCities, which is focused on the intersection between internet technologies and community engagement, and she also is affiliated with Wise Economy. Susan Stuart Clark is a board member of NCDD. Very happy to have her on board. And she's the director of Common Knowledge. She also is a consultant to local governments. Now, I'll let Susan talk more about this actual Tech Tuesday call, but basically this is a series of learning events that NCDD has been doing for the past 7 months or so, trying to do it on a monthly basis and usually focusing on a particular online tool to just help raise awareness in our community of what the possibilities are with online technology. And wanted to there's our welcome slide for the NCDD site. For anybody who isn't already familiar with NCDD, I hope you guys will go to the site and go to our join link at the top right where it says join now and become a member. We have a free membership option, and especially if you're participating in NCDD programs, we appreciate if you're actually a member of the community and a supporting member if you can swing it, but it's only $50 a year, so it's not so bad. We also have a national conference coming up in just a couple of months now. We're going to be focusing a good deal on online technology in addition to lots of other topics. It really is kind of the place to be every 2 years in October. If you're involved in Dialogue and Deliberation, we'll have about 400 people there, many leaders in the field. It's an exciting event for us, and I hope you're planning on joining us. And one thing I wanted to mention, especially for anyone who's just joining us on this call and you haven't used Join Me before, wanted to point out this toolbar that you'll see if you've gotten on Join Me successfully, both online and on the phone. You'll see a toolbar. And if you look, the second button in the toolbar is a little chat button or dialogue button. If you click on that, you'll actually see what chat is going on. You can chat to one person, just say hello to someone that you know, or you can chat to all. It's pretty intuitive, I'm happy to say. So hopefully we won't have to do too much tech support. So that is one option. Another option is clicking on the next to last button, which is the little person icon. If you click on that, you'll actually see the list of people that are on the call. You should be the first one. You should be able to right-click on it and change, if it says attendee 24 or something like that, you can change that to your name so that we all can see you. And if you scroll down, you'll see that a bunch of people are still on as just viewer 30, viewer 42, etc. So please do take a minute to change it to your name so that when you ask a question in the chat, we can actually see who you are. And do our best with this Tech Tuesday. I know that okay, Carolyn, your sound is back. It was gone for a second. So we'll do our best with this. It's our first time using Join Me, and we're excited because it has screen sharing, and I can actually pass the presenter role over to our speakers. And when I'm doing that, then I can pay more attention to the chat, and I'll also check my email and see if folks need help. But in the meantime, let me just pass it over to Susan and let you get us started.
Thank you so much, Sandy. And I think the other thing Sandy's going to be doing is starting a recording. So for people who, we hope you stay for the whole hour, but if you can't, or for colleagues who weren't able to join us today, we'll be having a recording as well as the visuals.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I did start recording already, so.
Great. Well, I am really excited to have this opportunity to do this particular Tech Tuesday in partnership with Della. We chose local government as the slice of all the exciting permutations of online engagement because so many exciting things are happening. It's a very dynamic field, but it's also some very concrete examples. that we can look at and think about. And as Sandy said, the past Tech Tuesdays for NCDD, we've been looking at specific tools and going deep in the vertical way. And today we're going to be horizontal and look across digital engagement tools for some principles about how to choose and how to use them. And I think for me, my background is I've got over 2 decades as a dialogue and deliberation practitioner, and only in the past 2 years have really started embracing the online engagement space, whereas my colleague Della is much more technically savvy. She brings a much deeper background in planning. My experience with local governments is more in the budget, strategic planning, special issues, tricky issues like pension reform. So I think together we've got an interesting look across of the field. And what I hope is I'll talk for about 10 or so minutes. Della might talk for about 15 minutes, but we're really hoping that we're going to get a conversation going. And we even in trying to say, well, we're just going to look at local government, we couldn't do justice to everything that's happening just in an hour of a Tech Tuesday. But the questions that you have, we've already reviewed some of them that were sent in ahead of time, and we've tried to put many of those into the material. But for additional questions, we're going to be sending out follow-up material. So please don't be shy about asking, and we'll do the best we can. For those of you, I had a look, and some of you are, or many of you are not actually local government officials. You might be practitioners, you might be suppliers. So I just wanted to get on the same page about what is the context into which we're introducing this online engagement. And this was some research done in California by the folks at Public Agenda for the Institute for Local Government in Davenport. But I think the research might well stand in other parts of the country, that you have public officials both at cities and counties saying public meetings are dominated by people with narrow agendas. So they've kind of got the usual suspect syndrome and a lot of cranky usual suspects, and they don't have, the majority of them have staff whose primary role is increasing public participation in decision making. So and many public officials are feeling less inclined to do public engagement and don't have the support to do it. And this is just a quick snapshot from where I sit working with local officials. They may be up at the top of this diagram, and they don't see that broad, quiet public out there in the orange field. They see the ones that are in their faces, the professional citizens, the advocates, and again the usual suspects or the usual stakeholders. And they don't really have experience with who are those other people out there. And as dialogue and deliberation practitioners, we know often the difference between a healthy, robust public decision is, the ability to actually tap into that untapped public. So the benefits of digital engagement, and you'll see I'm toggling back and forth. I like to use the phrase digital engagement because online might suggest to some people that you're thinking about laptops. And as we know, in the past, perhaps one of the reasons why local governments might have been foot dragging a little, besides the lack of staff or the lack of capacity, or inertia on digital engagement, they would say, well, we want to be inclusive, and so many of our residents don't have access to the internet and so forth. And now with the advent of much more mobile application, I think Della's got some numbers on this, but as I think you all know, over 90% of U.S. residents have access to a mobile phone, and close to 60% now have smartphones. So digital engagement is kind of the more inclusive piece. And what are the benefits? Well, you can obviously reach more diverse residents because you're reaching people at the time that works for them. You're reaching rural people. You're reaching younger people. You're reaching older people. High penetration of internet among older residents and so forth. So you can reach people who would not come down to a public meeting. And some of the data is that maybe 11% of U.S. residents have come to a public meeting, but way more than that are online. You can get more perspectives too. I think you may know one of the reasons why local officials are skittish is in many jurisdictions the tone at public meetings has become pretty charged. And so the online space, ironically, has become in some cases the more civil space. Obviously, you can have more informed participation. As people are engaging, you can actually give them the information they need and customize it. Are they a newbie? Did they need real basic background? Are they the rare few who are going to read a very long environmental impact report? You can give it to them in ways that they can digest it. And, of course, the benefit of concrete data for reporting and evaluation, very important. And then the notion that so many of us, perhaps as practitioners, are working with a department. Well, I'm with the planning department, or I'm working with the chief finance officer on the budget discussion or so forth. And so many of those departments are working in silos. And if you can create a robust platform for that local jurisdiction, you can have them develop more continuous engagement where residents are learning that they can get involved across issues. Now, many of you have seen this IAP2 spectrum, and this is just a quick adaptation. And again, the field of online or digital engagement tools is very, very large. But the part that I'm particularly interested in as a public participation practitioner is kind of on the consult and involve slice here that are a little bit more highlighted. And there's some excellent tools over on the left on the inform, and it's something jurisdictions don't do as well as they could, so I don't mean to diminish it. But for today's discussion, the examples I'm looking at are kind of in that more shaded blue slice. Now, the key here that I think you're going to hear from both Della and myself is you don't start with a tool, you start with your purpose. What are we trying to do in this public participation experience? And for me, one of the variables I always start with my partners and clients is where are we in the decision-making process? So here, this is borrowed from Sam Kainer's participatory decision-making model, but on the left here is the divergent piece. We're getting new ideas and perspectives and broadening beyond the usual suspects, and then on the right side is that convergent piece where you're getting into the deliberation. So this kind of complicated slide, which happened because my graphic person didn't come back from vacation when she said she would, but bear with me. What I've highlighted is the online piece. And so if you have, let's just say, a generic plan or issue at your local government, we've got our divergent part. That online piece can be in front of that community meeting and workshop, building information, building demand for that workshop, and it can also be the coming out of the workshop. You've created an appetite and a capacity on the part of those participants to continue the discussion online and bring others in. So it plays a very important role there. You get to that next phase where, we've had our first phase of public input and we're going to share that online. There may be online deliberation tools that fit into that convergent phase, and obviously a key strength of online is that thing that we help jurisdictions with is the reporting back, that closing that loop, which is so essential to building public trust. So that's just a for instance of how the online piece can be built all the way through. So I have a paper that the Institute for Local Government invited me to prepare that gives examples in all four of these categories, and I'll just touch on a few, and Della's going to touch on some more. But it's being used, these online engagement tools are being used across a wide variety of applications. Now this is just a for instance of the most basic way that online can expand participation. So you see here on the right, this is the City of Riverside, and this is their e-comment feature, and you can see that if someone couldn't make it to that Board of Library Trustees meeting and they wanted to comment, they can have access. So they don't have to go down to that meeting. Here's a for instance on the budgeting, an example of the notion of being able to customize. So here is a chance to do one of those prioritization exercises, and they're telling you, do you want the 5-minute version or the 15-minute version? And this is an example of beginning to implement this notion of thin versus thick. And some people are blending online tools so that they might use a text as in or a text way in or a very simple question to get people hooked to build this appetite or readiness to go deeper. This is the County of San Mateo and showing how they're building an audience over time. And in this case, it's a mind mixer, and Della's going to get into this. But one of the choices you have is you look at building this community of engagement across issues is, do you provide specific incentives over here? Who are the active users and what kind of visibility are they getting? Another way that people are using online tools is, again, this taking the best of and synergistically building an audience for your in-person meetings and then online. This was over in Contra Costa County. They had a meeting and they did all this great background information, and if you couldn't come to the meeting, you could still take advantage of the information that was provided and also provide your own input. And this is a MetroQuest example of, again, a staged process over several weeks or months and how they built, in this case, a planning situation, fully taking advantage of the visual capacities and information capacities of the online setting. So the thing that I found in interviewing a wide range of local officials on this is that, as I recall the slide that said there weren't that many local government staff whose primary purpose or function or job description was public engagement. It's like an other thing that they have to do. And so some jurisdictions are like, we don't really have anybody on this online engagement. We will just go get ourselves a tool and we'll slap it up there and we'll put the report and the PDF and the this, and then we will have done our job engaging the public. And as you can imagine, all they've done is transferred their usual suspect syndrome from, council chambers to online, and they get, a few comments from a few people. So the effective use of online engagement, these strategies should look very familiar to people who've been successful practitioners in-person engagement. It's the same things. And this is one of the reasons why I'm really excited about the advent of online engagement, because to use these tools well, local jurisdictions are going to have to revisit some of the basic principles of public participation that they would need for in-person as well. And so this gives all of us in the field of public participation an opportunity to help advance the culture of really effective online engagement. So again, you start with the purpose first, then you choose the tool. Again, make sure that you are helping that local jurisdiction understand what are the needed staff capacities. In some cases, in the wild woolly west of the proliferation of suppliers, they might, let a wishful thinking jurisdiction think that, oh, well, they'll do all this for me, but really you need to have your audience outreach information strategy set and the staff to follow through on that. And one of my favorite topics for local governments is how they partner with community organizations and other partners. And when I have here on your outreach, you're going to get the word out via multiple platforms and partners, seed the conversation. Some people ask me, well, wait a second, are you going to be slanting it? But if you've got a good mix of partners and just before you launch, you make sure that they each have, by Monday, can you get your comments into the site? When it goes live on Tuesday, people aren't going to this kind of empty, lame-looking conversation that only has, one comment. Nobody wants to be part of a, jump. If they're a little bit nervous, they're going to be much more excited to jump in a conversation that's already got some energy around it. And then really important opportunity in the online setting is providing the information visually. And I think many of you have probably already seen all the data about how we process visual information 60,000 times faster than text and so forth. But it's really important. And carrying it, as I said, for different audiences, because the online setting allows you to reach out to people who aren't already engaged. And they may need to understand who's the agency involved, and just really basics about the planning commissioners are making a recommendation to the council and so forth, because people in the field oftentimes don't step back enough to know what really basic information people need. So on that, I'm just going to wrap up before handing it to Della. In my observation, the implementation opportunities that many jurisdictions have yet to realize. So for these online engagement tools to really get to that upside potential of broadening and deepening participation, and we have better sustained public decision making, the higher ratio of visual to text. We still have, well, here's 8 paragraphs describing this thing, and then here's kind of the gratuitous little mini photo logged in. We have to start flipping that ratio. As I said, more basic background information. I had an example recently where we were doing planning in an unincorporated area, and the staff were spending so much energy saying, but we don't want them to talk about FEMA and floods. This area was in a floodplain. And instead of spending a lot of staff energy putting up rules, you may not talk about floods, they could have very easily put up some basic background information about our jurisdiction covers this, FEMA covers the floods, and then put a link to FEMA. So they could, these very frequent Q&As that staff keeps having to repeat over and over, they will save themselves time if they put that background information up. Looping back, how the public input was used. Close out each one of those online engagements. Cross-promoting across topics departments. We saw that with that Mind Mix, for example, and another popular tool, Open Town Hall from Peak Democracy. But there are ways, even within the topics, to point people across to other topics. And as I said already, partnering to build robust conversations. Do not assume if you build it, they will come. So that's just some of the reasons why I'm excited about the predictions that some people say that in 5 years the majority of local governments will be using online engagement. But I hope that all of us who are in this field, whether we're on the online tool supplier end, on the local government official end, or dialogue practitioner end, that we're all working together to realize the upside of this. And here's the article that I wrote for the Institute for Local Government. You can find it at my website. You can find it at their website. And I'm really looking forward to Della's presentation and our conversation.
And Susan, if you could put your link to that tool in the chat box, that'd be great.
I will do that. And all right, I was trying to talk so fast I went brain dead. How am I passing this to Della?
You just need to click on the little person icon up there and then choose
And
Della.
then I have to find Della.
Yes. There's a lot of
There we go.
So. And before Della, before you start talking, I just wanted to say a couple things real quickly that it looks like most people are seeing the slides, but a couple of people were having problems seeing the slides, and we're seeing kind of my initial screen. So if that's the case for anybody that's still on, close out of Join Me and then go to the link in the email, which is, join.me/274-100-258. It's that one. So try it again. A couple people were stuck, but they said that they closed out and opened it up, and it worked fine for them. So just close it and go back to that link that was in the email that I sent you. And also, Carolyn Kaywood, I tried to chime in with her question. She was asking, won't most jurisdictions want to purchase one tool and use it for all purposes? And I actually liked Tim Bonneman's response to Carolyn's question in the chat, which is that in most cases that strategy would be ill-advised because there's no one-size-fits-all tool. But I wasn't sure if you wanted to address that at all, Susan, before moving over to Della.
Well, I think when it was first starting out and staff were nervous and the prices were higher, I could see the temptation to do that. And also, as I mentioned, staff training is important. But I think Della's going to speak to the range of the tools and the state of the field that way. And I think one of the things that we're finding is more and more jurisdictions blending tools and getting savvier about which tools are good for which purpose. And I know Della will probably be picking up on that. But thank you, Carolyn. That's an excellent point.
Mm-hmm. Good. Excellent. Taking words out of my mouth. Are we ready?
Yeah, go ahead, Della. We have your screen up.
Okay, everybody can see. You should be seeing a picture with a adorable little baby, which is the way one should always try to start these things, right? So thank you very much for the invitation to join you today. I'm going to keep my remarks fairly brief. I'm going to blow through a couple of things really quickly. And as I'm talking, I'm not going to be able to see the chat box. So I'm going to try to make certain that we leave plenty of time for questions afterward.
And
a couple
Della,
of things.
One person did say that you sound very faint compared to Susan. I'm hearing you okay, but if you're using a headset or anything like that, definitely talk directly into your phone.
Okay, does that help a little bit? I scooched it forward.
That's great.
Okay, cool. So let me start first of all, just for sake of reference, at the bottom of the screen that you're seeing, and you'll see this on my last slide as well, there's a link there's a link that's short, which is my main website for my consulting practice, which mostly focuses on public engagement and planning for a healthy economic future for communities. That's the Wise Economy link. The Online Public Engagement Emporium link is for a site that I established a few months ago after having tried to maintain a white paper on the topic of online public engagement tools for a couple of years. When things are moving really fast, a white paper turns out to be a really lousy way to try to keep the information up to date and accurate. So I moved it over to this website. So most of what I'm going to be talking about today, when I talk about specific platforms, specific tools, you'll be able to find that, the links to those sites on the Online Public Engagement Emporium site. And you know, that's never perfectly up to date, but yeah, we do the best we can. All right, so let me give you a very quick sense of my background. As you saw from the first slide, I actually have certifications in city planning and in economic development. That's what that string of letters means. But I actually started out life as an English teacher. My kids, I was in middle school, so my kids weren't anywhere near this cute. But when I became an urban planner and I started working with local governments and with community organizations, I ended up taking a lot of the tools that I had learned as a teacher and applying them into my planning work. And that was very weird for a planner because, as Susan alluded, local government people very often, whether they're planners or economic developers or city managers, etc., nobody really teaches you how to interact with a group of people like this. So that meant that we ended up doing some pretty unconventional kinds of approaches to planning projects. My interest in technology, now Susan was very nice to say that she thinks that I'm this, you know, techno wizard or whatever she made me sound like there. In reality, I'm not. I don't know how to code. I have as much frustrations with my own computer as everybody else under the sun. But I got interested in this topic for a professional reason coming from my background in planning, but also for a selfish reason. I know how overextended I am all the time. I know how overextended most of the people around me are all the time. And we come to rely on these online technologies, whether they're computer-based or whether they're mobile-based, because we're all pretty overextended these days. And that runs the gamut, age, income level, you name it. So here's a quick game plan. We're going to talk a little bit about what the world of commercially available online public engagement platforms looks like right now. And we'll talk a little bit about some key questions to look at in terms of what is it that you should be thinking about when you're trying to decide which of the many, many options out there are the right ones for your project, your client, your community. And then we'll have lots of time for questions. All right, so Susan already alluded to this a little bit. I just want to kind of drive this point home. When you deal with the tech world, you will get people who, you know, anything that's new, anything that's kind of sleek and funky and novel looking, you know, is the source of excitement. And so sometimes elected officials particularly will say, oh, well, that's a fad. You're telling us that we need to do that because it's the cool thing to do. And, you know, in reality, I think if you're on this call, you know that that's not really the case. So the bigger question, and again, I think I preach you to the choir here, but let me give you something that you can then take back to when your communities push back against the idea of investing their very limited, very precious resources in online engagement technologies. If you're a mom with kids or you're a dad with small kids, a public meeting is at best an extraordinarily uncomfortable situation, and in many cases might be impossible. If you're disabled, whether it's physically or with a disability such as the autism spectrum that impairs your ability to speak in public, there's no way you can participate in a lot of our routine public feedback activities. We have more and more people in this country who work unusual schedules. So the 9 to 5 that we always have assumed so that we could have our meetings at 7 o'clock on the Tuesday evenings, that doesn't really work anymore because so many people are going to school on a regular basis or maybe a continuing education basis. They work jobs that aren't 9 to 5. And that's not just people who work in retail, that's people who work in medical technologies, in education, in many, many other aspects. So the next time somebody pushes back on you against the question of why should we bother to do this stuff, remind them of all the people for whom getting to a public meeting is not a realistic option, even if they wanted to. And obviously, you all know this. I've used this slide for a few years just to drive home this point. I think more and more people are aware of this. And as Susan alluded, we get our information from online sources. Doesn't matter whether I'm a 75-year-old grandmother, whether I'm a person on disability living in the inner city, whether I live in a rural place or an urban place. The documentation, particularly the Pew Charitable Foundation, has been one of the best sources on this. Use of online tools as just another part of routine life is growing all across the country. The challenge that we have, and I'm talking specifically today about platforms that are designed specifically for online public participation. Obviously, there's a lot of things that communities do online. So a lot of communities anymore have a Facebook, have a Twitter, have a blog on their main website. And those are important and those are valuable. The challenge is that in that kind of context, as Susan said, often what we see in a public online commentary can be more civil, as it were, than what we might see in some in-person situations. But the challenge is that we get these situations online where we open the doors wide open, and this really is what scares people off of doing online public engagement. Because when we put up an open comment form, and this is from a project that I did a couple of years ago, it was, just a very good example of sort of a troll commentary. That scares people off. It scares off participants and it scares off people who are in the local government who are trying to do the right thing, and they go, oh my God, this is basically all I've done is open the doors for that guy, which is a little inaccurate, but that's the fear. So what we need to do actually goes far beyond a Twitter, a Facebook, a blog, these kinds of open information sharing tools. They're important, but they're not the only piece of the equation. And if you have a community that's trying to do everything through Twitter, everything through Facebook, I would argue that they're probably not getting a very effective public engagement. And like Susan said, it can end up being basically the same usual suspects that were crowding the public meetings, or maybe not crowding, but dominating, just deciding to show up online now instead. So that's not what we want. What we want, and what so many of the emerging and new online tools do, is they give us an opportunity to channel that public engagement. So instead of allowing it to go any which way whatsoever and letting people say any which way thing that they want to say, you have an opportunity through these kind of tools to sort of guide people to stay on track. It doesn't mean that they have to. It doesn't mean that other options to talk about other issues have been closed off. But I use the analogy of a channel a lot because when you guide water, think about how a dam works. When you guide water into a channel through a turbine, you have a focus and you have the ability to create power. If you don't channel the water, it goes everywhere, and that power is dispersed. So quickly, here's the nature of what you're looking at when you're looking at online public engagement platforms or tools. And I know we've got a couple of folks who are associated with some of these online here, so it'll be interesting to see what kind of feedback I get from them. Here's the overall of the situation. It's predominantly a startup industry. Even the older technologies in terms of how the tech world operates are still really sort of in a startup phase. There's a lot of these participants and more all the time. And they range across backgrounds. And we'll talk about the importance of background in terms of informing how a platform works in a second. But you will find that there really is no one technology, there's really no one approach, and there's a lot of different operating and sales models. So just like you would select from an a la carte menu at a restaurant or a coffee shop, what you really end up having to do in this situation is not just take the first thing that becomes available to you or the first thing that you heard about from another community, but how is it that, what is it that fits both? What is the suite, potentially, that fits best for your situation? So let's get a little bit technical for a minute, and we can talk more about technical details. Like I said, I'm not a coder, but I know enough to probably get myself in a fair amount of trouble. But there's a whole bunch of different approaches in terms of the fundamental structures. So a lot of the online platforms that you will see are apps. So if you think about how an app on your phone works, if you have Instagram on your phone, Instagram isn't really, Instagram is great for sharing pictures. Instagram is not great for writing long paragraphs of information. Instagram can't do mathematical computations. So an app is something that is designed to fill a relatively narrow set of tasks. You can have a single app or you can have a suite of apps. So there's a couple of firms, Delib out of the UK is one of these, that actually has 2 or 3 different apps that will sort of fit together. So the majority of online public engagement providers are app-oriented. The app can be adjusted somewhat to fit your situation. It can be skinned, is the word that they use, made to look appropriate to fit with your website and your other online tools. But it's basically structured to do one thing. And so as long as that thing is what you want to do, great. If not, that app may not be suited for your situation. There are some that are semi-customized. So that may be more of a modular situation where you can add things and take things out. And do that in a relatively simple manner. The last option is build-a-suit. Build-a-suit is what we've always assumed in a lot of cases you had to do to get a website, that you had to create the thing from scratch. You probably, unless you've got a very, very, very unique situation, that's not necessary anymore. At best case, you should be able to get sort of a semi-customized situation. And what that means, and as Susan said this a minute ago, is that the cost of doing this online public engagement work has dropped pretty significantly over time. In a sense, it's like going from having off-the-rack options that maybe you need to take in a little bit on the side, but it comes to you fairly well fitted, as opposed to having to have it made for you from scratch. But the big question always is, how do you choose? How do I know which of these things will fit my specific situation? As Susan indicated in her comments, the range of what these tools are able to do, if you think about that entire spectrum of the public engagement process, we still are in a relatively early phase with this, like with a lot of other online platform areas where you've got a little bit, you can't do everything with it yet. I think within 5 or 10 years, we are going to see some much more robust, much more sophisticated manner or technologies for doing online public participation. Right now, it's a little more of a narrow window. But even within that narrow window, we've got some pretty significant choices. So the big question becomes, how do you choose? So these aren't in any particular order. They're a little bit from most fundamental to more technical. But I would say that most of these questions, there's not one of these that's more important than the other. So take these things into consideration. The first question, and again, Susan alluded to this, is the question of objectives. So there's different platforms are designed to meet different objectives. And I'm just giving you 2 examples here. So the top one that you see the word Calgary in there, and you can see lots of little green dots on it. That's from a tool called PlaceSpeak. PlaceSpeak, and I'm going to talk in a minute about what kind of background the founders of a tool came out of. PlaceSpeak founder is a geographer. PlaceSpeak's primary interest is in being able to identify whether or not an individual who's participating online comes from within a certain geography or not. Now, for certain projects, that can be very important. So if it's very important to the project, to the political leadership, to et cetera, to know that the feedback that they're receiving on a particular issue is coming from a particular location. Maybe it's a plan for a neighborhood and you want to know who's participating from within that neighborhood, or you only want to listen to people who are from within that neighborhood. PlaceSpeak can enable you to do that. But if the fundamental objective is to get feedback from a broader range of the community, PlaceSpeak may or may not be the right fit for that situation because it may raise questions about the legitimacy of participation from people who are from somewhere else. So it fits in certain situations if certain objectives are in place. If those objectives are not the ones that are being sought, then that may be problematic. Open Plans, which is a nonprofit out of New York, has a platform called Shareabouts that is very intentionally not asking for geographic information, and that's because they feel that anybody who's going to participate, that their voices need to be heard. And if you're in a situation like a very diverse metro area, that may be a very legitimate stance to take. With regard, the second model here is from MetroQuest. This is a beautiful, beautiful app that MetroQuest has developed that they fit into a variety of contexts. You can go through this process in a variety of situations, but every MetroQuest is going to walk through these kinds of steps. So there's going to be a welcome, there's going to be a priority setting, there's going to be a strategy setting, there's going to be a preferences. MetroQuest wrote a great blog entry about a month ago where they compared their platform to other platforms, and they very clearly identified, and I was very proud of them for doing that, that theirs is a priority setting, scenario evaluating platform, not an ideation platform. So if you have some scenarios that you want to get people thinking about, this is a good tool for that use. If you're still at the stage of, hey, what do you think we should do, that's a different kind of context. Helps if you hit the right button when you want to move forward. Okay. Susan alluded to the difference between the visual and the the tendency to default to a lot of text. And in a sense, to me, that looks like how we've tended to do public participation, which has been about a lot of talking. These are two different, fundamentally the same approach. It's asking questions and getting feedback. One is from Peak Democracy. One is from a Mind Mixer. And you can see that the Mind Mixer one is the one with the infographics on it. It's fundamentally doing the same thing, but it's doing it visually in a very different manner. The Peak Democracy piece is much more designed for detailed written commentary. That works very well in some communities and with some topics. With the Mind Mixer approach works very well for different kinds of topics and different kinds of communities. So there's a question about how accustomed is your community to writing out commentary. For many people, that process of being faced with a block that they have to fill in with words is very intimidating. And that can be the case even for people who are not, who are rather very well educated. Some people don't. I'm a writer by nature, so if you present me with a block of text to fill in, a place to type in my commentary, I'm perfectly happy to do that. But even among very educated people, that's not always the case. So there's a challenge there in terms of what's going to be the comfort level with that interface with your public, and particularly the public that's interested in the topic that you're going to be pursuing. Susan alluded to the questions of mobile and the use of tablets, of smartphones, and the enormous and very swift penetration of smartphones and of non-smartphones that have SMS or texting capability in the U.S. And if you do work in other parts of the world, you may be very aware of the extraordinary speed of adoption of smartphones and SMS-equipped phones in other parts of the world, in places where that's been an extraordinarily transformative impact, where they're basically leapfrogging, in some places, the landline, period. The photo on your left-hand side shows this one's from Urban Interactive Studio, or Engaging Plans is the name of the platform. It shows a very nicely done online a survey tool that works very well, and I've used this one a good deal. It works very well on a smartphone screen. If you have a community that has a high level of smartphone use or tablet use, that becomes a very important and effective piece of the communication. And you can't assume that just because a site shows up okay on your computer screen that it will show up in a functional manner on a handheld device. For certain communities,
yes. This is Sandy. I'm not sure if you can hear me.
Gotcha.
I just wanted to point out that we only have 7 minutes left until 2 o'clock Eastern, and so we want to definitely leave time for Q&A from folks. So definitely.
I'm sorry.
Wrap it up.
We got started a little late, didn't we? I was timing off of when I got handed off. I'm sorry.
And I went a little long, Della. I'm sorry.
Oh, no worries. At any rate, the tool on the right-hand side is actually completely based on text messaging, and that's from Textizen, and that's very powerful for communities that don't have high levels of smartphone penetration. There's the question of priority setting, and many tools need to be able to account for priority setting and do it in a way that's very clear and very easy for folks to understand. what you want to be a little bit careful of is that some tools are designed to permit, basically to enable archiving. And I think it's worth asking the question of, are people really going to be able to sort through the information that we get from this tool and set priorities, or is it going to be difficult enough that people feel that they have to default to just archiving instead of including? Again, the more visual we can get, the better. The one that looks like it has sticky notes on it is from CrowdBright. That's actually a very powerful technology that really overcomes a lot of that resistance to typing long blocks of text that I mentioned before. Obviously, being able to spread the word, either got ahead of myself. Being able to spread the word becomes important. Newsletters, email newsletters continue to be extremely important. The one that says Sydney Your Say is from Bang the Table, and they do a very good job with the email newsletter functionality. This is a big piece that I want to hit. So now we've got a couple of things that are more tactical, and then we'll be wrapping it up. Different tools have different levels of control over the process. And this goes back to what Sandy said about the need to understand what the capacity is of the community to manage this process. This page that I'm showing here is from an Engaging Plans platform. When I was managing one of these, I could go in and do pretty much everything I wanted to myself, with the exception of some very deep programming and CSS work that it needed. But if you don't have staff to dedicate to it, this would be overkill. And so the question becomes, how much control do you want, how much can you manage, and how much can you deal with? There's always the question of who's participating. I alluded to that with the Play Speak question, but you do need some kind of accountability, some kind of participation knowledge. And what kind of data analysis capability will you have? MindMixer in particular does a very good job at giving you infographics and giving you very clear information that helps you to understand very clearly who you're looking at, who's participating, what issues are getting the most attention. And we had a question on the earlier questions about people with disabilities and who speak other languages. I'm going to quickly answer that question, which is a lot of sites will default to Google Translate, but if you've used Google Translate, you know it doesn't work very well. So really there is not a good answer to that question at this point other than to mirror the site in multiple languages, which is certainly doable. And finally, ask the question of the strength of the company. How long have they been around? What's their staffing level? What's their expertise? What background are the founders coming out of? All of these questions help you understand exactly the context in which a particular tool is most likely to work most effectively. And finally, just to drive home one more thing, you can have the best online tools in the world, but without a significant invitation, and that goes back to the public engagement piece that you all are so well versed in. Just having good tools is not enough. It's really critical to extend the invitation for people to not just give feedback, but to be able to join the community team. And now I will attempt to breathe. And Sandy, I know there were things that went by on the chat screen. I'll shut up and we can answer any questions you want now.
Okay, thank you, Della. You did an amazing job, and so did Susan. And I'm afraid we're running out of time. I'm looking through the chat. I also asked everybody a second ago if there are burning questions right now that people have, or even really good examples that they could share very quickly. Some folks on the call are just extremely versed in online engagement, and I welcome Dave Biggs or Tim Bonneman or others who might be able to share just a minute of advice for people. maybe something that wasn't captured in the presentations but perhaps came up in the comments. There have been so many good ones. And while you're thinking about doing that, of course, press *6 on your phone in order to unmute yourself. But I'm going to grab the presenter role back and show a couple things for those who have to leave in a minute. Share my screen, yes. Just wanted to mention that if you go to ncdd.org/TechTuesdays, you can actually see archives of many of the past Tech Tuesdays. And so Della mentioned a couple that we've done, like Play Speak and MetroQuest, so you can learn more about those through our archives. And also, in addition to that page, and that's where you can stay up to date on future Tech Tuesdays, wanted to show you in our Resource Center, if you haven't been there yet, you just go to the NCDD site, you click on Resources, and then if you go down here to this toolbar that says I'm looking for, choose Tech for Engagement. And you'll see there's about 151 resources there. You can also choose tags, so you can make your search results smaller than 151. But we have a lot of great tools archived here. I just want to mention, NCDD itself has experimented so much in online technology. And one of our successful experiments was recent, using a tool called Code Digital, which allowed people to share their ideas for the upcoming conference and rank those ideas and edit each other's ideas. And I just want to mention that, one of the things that we've done over the years is we have our blog, our website as a backbone, and of course our listservs. But our blog allows for threaded comments, so we can have some discussion going on the blog. But then we also have been experimenting with Code Digital and with many other technologies for different purposes, just like I think Susan was mentioning, trying different tools based on what it is that you need. And it really has worked for us. And one of the things that we've learned over the years is that one of the most important things is just good email notifications for any program. People need to know that something is going on in order to go back to the tool, whatever it might be. So check out this resource on the NCDD site, Tech for Engagement. And then I also wanted to mention our partners. NCDD is involved in Community Matters, as many of you know, and they also do these great conference calls. And actually their next one, which is on the 5th, is about deepening digital public engagement. So this is a great group to encourage to go to that. If you go to communitymatters.org, you'll be able to click on upcoming conference calls and find that one. So is anybody interested in pressing *6, unmuting yourself, and asking a question at this point, even though we soon have to close, or sharing a story or tips?
I'm just going to throw in one thing. I was writing a response on the chat. One thing that I think is maybe worth exploring down the road is for... I'm sorry, that was Della. Okay. Yeah, I can shut up if somebody else wants a chance. God knows I've been saying enough. One thing, as we pointed out, the online tools right now, there's only one that's really structured around deliberation per se, and it's very text-heavy and very intensive. I have a hard time seeing it being used in a very broad public context, although I think it's very interesting. It's called e-deliberation. But what I'd be really interested to see if anybody's doing anything like this, I think the online tools as they exist right now give some great opportunities for ideation, for feedback, for priority setting on policy issues, scenario evaluation, things like that. But I'm wondering if one way to use online and offline together would be to focus online in those kind of spaces and shift to using in-person really more for that higher level deliberation, which means structuring it very differently from the typical town hall meeting that we usually end up getting stuck with. So I'm curious as to whether anybody has kind of pursued that.
Della, this is Dave Biggs. I wanted to reinforce that. I think that's a great idea, and I also wanted to reinforce one of the things that I saw in the chat session that related to it. People were talking about the need to use multiple tools for multiple purposes, and one thing that we've been very proud of is the projects that we've worked on with at MetroQuest, where other tools are also used, and it really helps to identify where some tools are strong and where other tools can really pull in some resources. And we've worked on many projects where, for example, MindMixer was used at the beginning to really crowdsource what the ideas are from the community. Then MetroQuest was used to help hone down a number of different alternatives that were presented. Textizen was used to broaden the survey even more, and then, you know, last but not least, you know, there was a lot of face-to-face deliberation that happened that just addresses the need to there's certain conversations that you just can't have online, that people need to discuss ideas with their neighbors face-to-face, and I think all of it comes together to really complement different forms of public engagement and address not only different demographics, but different ways that people prefer to be engaged.
I think that's excellent, Dave. One of the that's been one thing I've been really, really encouraged to see happening in online public engagement. Is I think people are starting to understand the potential for using that it has to be a multi-pronged strategy, both online and in person, and starting to see those kinds of interactions between the various online providers. A couple of years ago, I managed a project that was, I basically forced engaging plans and MindMixer into a shotgun wedding. And at the time, nobody had ever done anything like that before. So it ended up basically looking like one website. That's, I think, the direction that we're going to see more and more, is that it's going to have to be that kind of multi-pronged, multifaceted strategy. So I'm really glad to hear you guys saying that.
Yeah, and Della and Susan, Carolyn Kaywood asked a question. I think it's a great one. Can you say anything about the value of gaming in online civic engagement? And then after that, we do need to close because people are starting to leave for other commitments. So
Understood. And I can hang on as long as anybody wants to. With regard to gaming, that's been a really interesting situation. Now, some of the platforms, MindMixer probably more than most of them, have been really using gaming strategies as a way to keep people, basically to maintain participation. I think it's a really intriguing strategy for doing that, especially around issues that are more kind of long-term and not real hot button, like a comprehensive plan or a transportation plan or something like that. But if you look at a MindMixer strategy, you will see a fairly significant gaming component where people get points, and if you get to a certain point level, you can cash that in for an award, which might be a round of golf at the municipal golf course or lunch with the mayor or something like that. I think the jury is still out a little bit as to, I haven't seen any definitive proof of that enabling higher levels of engagement, but it's certainly an interesting strategy.
Yep, and I'm excited to say that at the NCDD conference we're going to have a session on online gaming.
Cool.
I think it's our last day plenary. We're going to have a game and gamification session that we're excited about. But anyway, Susan, do you have any closing words you'd like to share? Are you still with us? Haven't heard you in a while, but you might need to press *6 again if you've muted yourself. Be sad if we lost Susan, because she is the amazing.
Sorry, I've been talking and I thought I was unmuted. Just on the gamification, I think Della spoke to the very important variable of gaming relative to people's participation, but another way that, and it's still young yet, people are using gamification within the actual decision. So you might have a budget challenge or a simulation or this or that. So there's different ways that the broad notion of gamification is coming in. And I think I'm really excited that is at the conference. And that's exactly, Sandy, the point I wanted to make as a colleague and a appreciative partner with you in the fact that NCD does these Tech Tuesdays. Obviously, we perhaps overestimated or underestimated how much time it was going to take to get this material out, and I've captured everything on the chat. We'll put it up. But I think this is like a really excellent conversation. I hope it continues on the blog, on the material we send out to people, and also at the conference and beyond. So I really just want to thank everybody for participating. This is a really rich discussion, and we did have a lot of expertise in the audience, and we want to make sure we continue to draw that out. Thank you, everybody, for the opportunity.
Yeah, and thank you, Susan and Della. You guys were fantastic, and we will definitely be having a recording of this session. That's one of the things we're very excited about with Join Me, is we can record both audio and the screen sharing. So hopefully that will be a nice record of our call. We'll add it to YouTube, and we'll be emailing all of you with some links and a link to that archive. And feel free to email me at sandy@ncdd.org with feedback on this call, especially on Join Me, so because this is something we'll be using more and more and getting a better handle on as we go forward. So thanks so much, everybody, and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks so much, folks. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks again.
Bye, everybody.